exerted control and stability by keeping his kids at arm's length, far enough that we couldn't see his vulnerability, but close enough that he felt like he was taking care of us. For that matter, I had never talked with my parents about anything emotional, let alone things that were heavy and terrible. This meant that aside from the basic facts of my life, they didn't really know me either. We put our energy into keeping up appearances within our community and our family. And so when I floated the idea of this trip to my dad, I was surprised that he responded eagerly. In fact, he found it brag-worthy that his adult daughter wanted to get time alone with him, a rarity in his own circle of friends. He never knew that the catalyst for my initiating the trip was worry and concern about his well-being. And now we'd be driving up and down the coast of Maine together, sharing a hotel room and every meal. We'd have approximately 72 hours to fill, and I had no idea what we'd talk about. I had plans to ask him about his own emotional wellness and to learn more about his life before I was born. I was excited by what I might learn, but equally nervous that this trip would somehow worsen our relationship. I felt pressure to plan our trip down to the minute, so as not to allow for any unaccounted time. I feared any lull would lead to a sudden realization on either of our parts that this trip was a big mistake. I researched different things to do in Maine's coastal towns, coming up with multiple activity options so that I could defer to him and allow him to retain a sense of control. I came fully prepared with a list of questions jotted down in my Apple Notes app, but never in a million years did I imagine that we'd discuss my trauma, and for the first time in nearly 5 years at that. My whole life, I had been accustomed to hiding from my parents fragments of myself that could be considered bad or unacceptable in my family or culture, leading me to live a double life. I questioned my cultural and religious identity in secret. As an adolescent, I snuck onto AIM at night to gossip with friends and flirt with chatroom strangers in secret. I learned to explore my body and its needs in secret. I giggled at inappropriate things in secret. I struggled in secret. I was used to it, but now my dad was slowly opening a door between us that had been shut throughout my life. This trip, the first of many we would take, was meant to be about him, but he demonstrated curiosity and an interest in my life experiences that was so novel I didn't know how to respond. Sure, I had a desire to know my papa better, but I also feared him getting to really know me. I worried about being able to maintain my own facade and his idea of who I was, an amenable, morally proper Indian daughter. And I worried he would only be reminded of what a disappointment I was to him. For as long as I can remember, I have felt on a daily basis that push and pull between who I am around my family and who I am alone with my friends. A feeling ultimately rooted in something called bicultural identity straddling, which is defined by researchers as an ongoing process of adaptation resulting from living within two different cultural influences. I know firsthand the suffering, the questions, the inconsistencies, and the inner torment that come with trying to occupy two spaces at once, with having no sense of belonging to one or the other and needing to chart a path forward anyway. And I know I'm not alone. Children of immigrants are often constantly straddling at least two cultures, two value systems, and two sets of usually differing societal expectations. Many of us are walking a tightrope, trying to steady ourselves as to not get devoured by the abyss below. In truth, this identity straddling applies to anyone trying to adapt under more than one cultural influence. I, for example, am multicultural. For my first 18 years, my mom, siblings, and I spent most summers in Kobe, Japan, where my mom grew up and lived until her marriage at age 18. So although both my parents are Indian, raised by Indian parents themselves, and although I grew up in the United States, I am often nostalgic for my childhood summers in Japan, where I would freely play with my cousins who were around the same age as me. My mom identifies as a third culture kid. Her Eastern values are rooted more in Japanese cultural norms than in South Asian ones, and she's always been more open-minded and accepting of other norms and cultures. In part, I think, because of the international school she attended growing up. My dad, who hails from Patiala, was the first in his family to permanently move away from India, first to the United Kingdom with my mom.